Who wants to be the best wife, the best mother, the best cook? Well, after years of women aspiring to be independent, strong and successful, there is a growing trend in the US, glamorizing the stay-at-home life. What's behind this shift? And is it as wonderful as it's portrayed to be? I'm Stefanie Dekker, and this is The Street.
My sister's in town to visit, and she's been craving bubblegum so bad, but she ran out, so I just decided to make it for her.
So one of the most common questions I get asked is my advice to high school girls who want to be traditional wives in the future.
This is probably going to be a hot take, but I genuinely believe that it is so much harder to become a wife, to build a family, to serve, love, and nurture a husband than it is to be a businesswoman or a woman with a really successful career.
They're not entering the workforce anymore, wanting to be what they call the trad wife. But it goes beyond women just choosing to stay at home. This online movement, which started in the West, is seeing them serving their families in chic couture, focusing on homemaking while documenting it on social media. So, have influencers who are raising the family and being provided for by their partners become the dream? Or is it a romanticized view of the 1950s housewife enabled by platforms like Instagram and TikTok? Is there a political and religious element to this? Or is this just for the privileged few? Joining us to unpack all of this is Munashe Ashlyn, fashion journalist, digital creator and founder of media platform In the Fashion Focus in London, and Shanai Tanwar, a poet and journalist who explores femininity and racial justice in Juneau, Alaska. Now, I want to tee off what the trad wife is before we start this conversation, because it may be the first time you've heard of a trad wife, or you may have just seen it on social media but aren't entirely sure of who she is. Well, Rima Cheer explains.
She's beautiful, she's slim, wearing a sundress, baking sourdough, or even making cereal from scratch. She's the trad wife, and she's making waves online. The term appeared in 2020, and it's becoming increasingly popular and controversial. There's no exact definition of a trad wife, but you know one when you see one. Wearing couture while whipping up breakfast for her children, or she's at her farm, tending to the garden, her kids running free in perfect clothes, there may be even a perfect dog. It's pretty inoffensive content, so why are people so fired up about this? It's more about the messaging behind these videos, that what women should aspire to is returning to a more traditional, feminine and submissive role within the home. Political ideas tend to show up in subtle ways through fashion, health, fitness and lifestyle content. The idea for us to be thinner and take up less space in the family home, even though that should be our domain, is a pillar of conservatism. And these ideas becoming popular amongst young women goes hand in hand with a rise in conservative and right-wing governments as well. So is the trad wife aesthetic appealing because it's popular or because of the values it represents?
Where is this return to the homemaker coming from?
Yeah, thank you, Stefanie. From my understanding, a lot of it has to do with the hustle culture that women were subjected to in the early 2000s. You can see that all across pop culture, really, in the movies and the media that was coming out from that time, where the girl boss sing era was where women were taking up space in the workplace, showing up, doing better than their male counterparts. But I think eventually that led to a lot of burnout in the female population. You're thinking about the gender wage gap, you're thinking about sexual harassment at the workplace, and a lot of other factors that uniquely affect women. And that may be where the temptation to choose a softer life, choose a life where you don't have to deal with these pressures and instead can go to the comfort of domesticity. I believe that's where a lot of this comes in.
Munashe, can we have it all as women? The full-on job, the family, the kids, being a fabulous cook, being the doting wife. I mean, is this just too much pressure on us, particularly young women today?
I truly believe that you can have it all, just not at the same time. And I think when we see the likes of Nara Smith, Sophia Richie, they're able to make it look so manicured and so easy. But what we fail to realize, many viewers don't realize, is that these people have teams. They have stylists, they have au pairs, they have gardeners. We may see a 1-minute TikTok that looks like she spent all day baking. She's beautiful, she's glamorous, she's wearing Ferragamo, Burberry. But we don't see the baby screaming in the background who's been looked after by the nanny. We don't see that there's a chef who gave her the recipe of how to make, bubble gum from scratch. These are all things that kind of hide the hardships of being a homemaker. Being a homemaker is a full-time job. And the other thing that many people forget is that even though Nara Smith portrays the homemaker, she's also a modern entrepreneur and a businesswoman who makes millions off of the content that she makes. She had a partnership with Marc Jacobs, so she's earning a lot of money from the image that she portrays, and it's not realistic for the average woman to look at that and say, that's my model of what womanhood is. It's almost like a caricature, like watching Marilyn Monroe in the 1950s. It's escapism.
Escapism, I think that's very interesting. And what you're saying there segues perfectly into the next clip we want to play, because there has been criticism of the influencers who are promoting this lifestyle online, but often this goes hand in hand with wealth and it being a choice, which not everybody has. Well, Tradwife influencers are defending themselves.
When Nara's filming her videos, the entire side of the kitchen that's out of frame is full of dishes, crusted dough that I have to soak for 5 hours. Guess who cleans that up?
You. And I'm so grateful. I just slave away in the kitchen. I don't have a job, and I have a whole production team at my house making that happen. To clarify, none of that is true. I'm a working mom. But cooking has always been a massive part of my life, especially after I got diagnosed with lupus and my eczema started flaring up again. I'm still learning and figuring out my own faith. I'm not in any way a hardcore Mormon. Both me and my husband are on our own journeys and figuring out how we want to raise our kids. I love cooking for the people I care about. It's not something that's expected of me or something that I need to do. I just love doing it. My husband insisted that we go to the mall and I get whatever I've been wanting and just treat myself, because I never like to spend money on myself. I've always wanted to be a young mom because growing up, my dad would always tell us that he regrets having kids later in life. And I know it's not for everyone. He was always very mature and independent and did a lot of things at a very young age. So I never feel like I'm missing out on any of the partying, any of that, because I've done all of that.
Shanai, I want to pick up on what Munashe was saying there. I mean, looking at their content, it really is very, very far away from the average woman, isn't it? I also don't believe that there isn't a team behind them, as Munashe was saying, that they don't have an agent. I mean, and also, like, who puts on their Valentino dress if you have one, and that is a minority of women in the world anyway, and then you go to the kitchen and whip up a risotto. I mean, I was looking at this content and I was like, what is the message here? So why do they have millions and millions of followers? Is it talking to something in the female youth today?
I think there's a couple of factors at work. A lot of this content tends to be quite rage baity in internet slang. So content that's deliberately supposed to be sensational or provocative, certain content that specifically highlights, for example, how young the specific tradwife is, that is going to definitely get some sort of attention, whether it be positive or negative. While at the same time, I do think that with the internet becoming more open access and a lot of younger folks just being online, able to access all these sites, does make a younger audience more susceptible to becoming viewers of this content and then unknowingly or knowingly engaging with content that perpetuates certain gender norms that have unfortunately disfavored women historically. And that's where the harm particularly comes in, is when folks are reposting and engaging with this content, and in return, the influencer in question gets millions of dollars in partnerships, in views, in the creator fund. There's a lot of ways for them to monetize this lifestyle while at the same time subscribing to an ideal that is unattainable and that has historically disfavored women.
Munashe, how much pressure does this put on young girls who think that maybe this is the way forward, not being aware, as so many things are on social media, that it is curated, that there's a massive team behind it, that there's a lot of money behind it? How dangerous is this to expectations?
It puts an immense amount of pressure on young women. I've looked through Nara Smith's comments and I've seen young girls in their early 20s who say things like, I've never been in a relationship before, I don't have children yet Nara Smith has this beautiful house. She's married to Lucky Blue Smith, who's, this handsome, Prince Charming like model. She's got these beautiful children, and they feel like they're behind. They feel like they're missing out on this thing that they're seeing online and everybody's praising. And meanwhile, they're, Gen Z, they can't afford to buy a house. They're living with their parents. They've graduated from university. They can't get a job and they're unable to date because everyone else in their age group is going through the same thing. So dating is the last thing on their minds and marriage feels miles away. And then you've got Nara Smith in her early 20s, who's achieved everything that society tells women that they should have. So it creates this gap of where you are feeling inadequate and where she is and feeling like, you're failing somehow because this 23-year-old was able to do it and you're not able to.
Shanai, are there political or religious undertones to this, to the influencers that we're seeing, to the traditions that they are advocating as, the perfect way to be as a woman?
If you look at specifically the content coming out of folks like Nara Smith, there is a Mormon element to it. A lot of times their captions have scripture directly from the Bible. There is an emphasis on how this is the natural order of things. This is the intended order of things in a predeterministic way. This is what women are supposed to do. And that goes hand in hand with the political ideologies as well. We are living in a time where the ideas of the male loneliness epidemic and the manosphere are rampant, and they are putting women at harm as well when women are supposed to act a certain way in order to be appealing to men at a time where male attitudes towards being with women seem to be that women don't want to be with us. And to become appealing in this way, as Munashe said, in a society where there is so much pressure on what is expected of women, this goes hand in hand with the rise in political conservatism worldwide, where the belief in a strict gender binary or in the strict following of certain norms is definitely something that is expected in relationships.
Munashe, go ahead, because both of you at the same time said, yes, you do believe that is the case. Go ahead.
I believe there's an element of capitalism and propaganda behind the Tradwife movement, because this is the new nuclear family for the Gen Z generation. After the war, they had to market families so that they could get children and, rebuild the society from all the people who were lost in the war. This is Gen Z's movement of, getting the nuclear family back. We're seeing more women choosing to be child-free. We're seeing the population go down in terms of birth rates. So this movement allows this propaganda that, look at Nara Smith, she's in her early 20s and she's not waiting until she's 35 and she's a girl boss to have a family. You can do it too. You can be the homemaker, but also be a millionaire influencer who has millions of views on TikTok. It's a new way to market the same misogynistic, sexist things that we've seen throughout the 20th century.
Because that's the opposite of the trend, right? That women were actually getting married later, having children later, focusing more on their careers. Well, a divorce lawyer in Texas said that what today's generation of men want in a wife is a provider, but who's submissive. Listen to this.
This generation of men want submissive provider wives. Like, they say they want a traditional submissive woman, but they also expect her to split the mortgage. As a divorce lawyer, I've seen the math on this and it never adds up. We're watching men ask for the emotional labor of the 1950s and a financial partnership of 2025. They want a woman who is quiet, agreeable, soft-spoken, but also one that works full-time, manages the home, raises the children, and somehow still makes them feel like a king when he enters a room. That is not a partnership, that's a contradiction. Because what they're really wanting is someone who makes money but doesn't make any noise, who only speaks when spoken to, who never nags but always nurtures. And if she dares set a boundary or voice a need, suddenly she's too much. This version of modern masculinity is confused. It wants control without responsibility. It wants submission without support. It wants her to carry the weight emotionally, financially, domestically, but not ask where he's been or why his phone is always on Do Not Disturb.
Shanai, your reaction first.
I think the lawyer said it better than anyone really can. Ultimately, a lot of tradwife culture does fall into the male gaze and male expectations of what an ideal partner is. And like Munashe mentioned earlier, there is a lot of invisible labor that goes into running a house. My mother was a stay-at-home mother, and that was not something that she actively got the opportunity to choose to do. And I am only now beginning to understand the kind of labor it takes to raise children in a household where you have to support your husband as well. And on top of that, in the current economic conditions, it is just not enough to have one breadwinner in the household. We are expected to have at least two members of the family working if you want to make rent or eventually become a homeowner. And this is where the contradiction really, really comes in, because it's easy for the male expectation to be that they can detach emotionally and domestically from those around them and focus just on providing economically for the family. But women don't get the opportunity to do that, and they are therefore burdened with all sorts of different expectations, be that emotionally in their marriage, with their children, and ultimately financially as well.
Munashe, these influencers have millions of followers. Their target audience is women. Is this resonating with a particular type of woman, or does this kind of content transcend race, culture, religion, social status? How would you describe it?
I believe it is resonating with women from all different walks of life. I think women look at this content and it's like Shanai said, there's an element of femininity to it, this sense of, being this all-round woman who can do it all, this superwoman. She's a boss because she's making money off of content creating, but she's also this, submissive, soft-spoken wife who whispers everything. I think some women look at that and they might, work 9-to-5 jobs and they feel like this is an opportunity for me to see what my life could be like if I had a soft life, for example. There's a lot of femininity content out there on social media that teaches women how to speak softly to be able to get a high value man. And it's this idea that if you are, seen and not heard, you can get this amazing man. But the fine print is that you won't actually get to be yourself.
Well, critics of the tradwife influencers say that this is all a show, a performance for attention.
Have you ever asked yourself why it is that tradwives and other conservative female influencers who promote traditional gender roles have all the time in the world to make cereal from scratch, but somehow never seem to record themselves doing essential domestic labor like vacuuming, trying to get a particularly nasty stain out of a shirt, or scrubbing a toilet? When they are performing labor in these videos, it's always something that, strictly speaking, is unnecessary, and they are doing it the hardest way possible. Because the answer is that it is for show. It is all a performance. In his remarkably prescient 1899 book, The Theory of the Leisure Class, Thorsten Veblen coined the terms conspicuous consumption and conspicuous leisure, suggesting that those with wealth and power, no longer having any economic production to contribute themselves, instead contribute to the production and consumption of leisure. And those consumption practices, those leisure activities, are conspicuous precisely because that is how the leisure class signals their difference from the working class, signals their exceptionality and their superiority. They're not better than us because they can make their children cereal from scratch. They're better than us because they are so wealthy and well off that they have nothing more important to worry about.
Shanai, it's interesting, isn't it? The fact that being a stay-at-home mom is being glamorized, whereas in many cultures it is ordered, it is demanded. Girls don't get the chance and opportunity to an education. They need to have as many children as possible, serve their husbands. So there's very dangerous messaging in this, isn't there? And I also want to ask you, how big is the role of social media and pop culture in all of this?
I think that's a great question, Stefanie. There are a lot of dangers to romanticizing this type of life, especially because the reality is that it's a fantasy at the end of the day. It is a fantasy for women to aspire to and for men to dictate, and no one ends up winning in these conditions aside from those who get to monetize it. And that's the harsh reality of the situation. And social media does add a voyeuristic aspect to it. If nothing else, then there's a curiosity about how these women are achieving everything For example, the first time I got Tradwife content on my Instagram feed, I had a sort of, jump start reaction, because it is at the same time both intriguing and alienating for women and for other audiences, because it's like undoing so much progress that feminism has made over the past several generations. And I think you're absolutely right that in certain cultures it is mandated almost for women to give as many children as possible, to primarily be domestic individuals in the family. And when we romanticize these things, when we actively promote the idea that women staying in the kitchen just are happier, or raising families are just happier, then we take away from the joys that women can really get when they pursue their own careers, when they prioritize themselves, and when they ask for their partner to show up equally in the domestic realm as well.
I agree with you, because I never got this kind of content on my social media algorithm. So I was looking into it, preparing for this show, and I have to say it did trigger me somewhat because of all the issues that we have been speaking about. Munashe, you are a fashion journalist. Is this also moving beyond the social media realm? Is it showing up on the catwalks? Because we are seeing, I'm sorry, nobody is going to wear their Valentino or Balenciaga into the kitchen to bake some sourdough. It's just simply not realistic, but this is what is selling. So is it also translating on the catwalk? Are you seeing that sort of idea come out there?
Absolutely. When we look at fashion today, even if you look at lower level high street brands, they are emulating luxury brands, but they're doing something called quiet luxury, which is this idea of minimalism. They call it, what's the word? They call it old money aesthetic. And even that title itself, where does old money come from? We think of conservative families with long lines of generational wealth, like the Rothschilds, for example. Donald Trump is a great example. His children come from old money. I remember there's an interview of Donald Trump who said, my father gave me a small loan of $1 million. So it's this idea that fashion is about emulating the rich, this old money, quiet luxury. There's a brand called Loro Piana, and they make plain black baseball caps, and they're over £1,000 or $1,000 rather. And we're seeing that in fashion. And I think the reason we're seeing this kind of minimalism reign in fashion is because we're at a point now where commoners and working class people can emulate a Nara Smith. They can, save up their money and get the Marc Jacobs bag that she's promoting. So now the next level that, the wealthy, the elite use is time. You can't buy time, and that is now being made a luxury. That's why when we see Nara Smith make bubblegum from scratch, we're so impressed, because as a working class person, you can bake what she's baking. You can, buy the clothes that she's wearing, but you can't buy the luxury of time that she has. And that leisure, that luxury to be a woman of leisure, is something that will always keep the elite separate from the working class. And that is what people from higher levels of economic freedom want. They don't want to be able to go down the street and see someone wearing a knockoff Hermes that looks exactly like theirs.
Such a good point. The luxury of time that, of course, those women who work, who have responsibilities, who juggle, who cook, who care for their kids, know that nothing is as glamorous as it is portrayed online. A final thought to you, Shanai. How difficult is it to be a young woman today?
That is such a broad question, and I have so many thoughts on this. The expectations are incredibly mixed, as we saw with the video of the lawyer who was talking about this trend. It's a walking, talking contradiction. You open social media and there's 10 ways in which you can be a girl boss, but also be a clean girl, but also be a coquette girl, be loud but don't take up too much space, be vocal but also just enough to get by, and at the same time somehow still be subservient ultimately to the male voice and the male gaze. There's also so many female role models or influencers to look up to who you would want to emulate, but again, you don't have that luxury of time, or frankly, you don't have the money, because mothers who are actually at home raising kids, doing the laundry, doing the dishes, they do not have the time to set up a tripod and record every single thing that they're doing. They do not have time to bake sourdough from scratch every single day because they're too busy meal prepping for 3 meals a day for their children under 10 years old. And that is the reality of being a middle class, working class woman who has children and is raising them in a domestic household.
I think for sure also the bottom line is the pressures of judgment and expectation on women have certainly been there throughout the generations. Munashe and Shanai, thank you so much for such an interesting conversation, and thank you all for tuning in. If you have a comment about our show, talk to us on social media. This is also your show, and we're always open to your suggestions. Use the hashtag or the handle AJStream, and we will look into it. Thanks for being part of the conversation, and I'll see you soon.